Hi, and welcome back to my series, Proven Answers to Life's Biggest Questions. In this episode, which is going to be the most groundbreaking of all the episodes so far, expressing and proving things that I've never seen anywhere else, we're going to deal with the most controversial chapter in the Bible, Genesis 1. The secular mentality in the world tries to use what's in this chapter to mock and discredit the Bible as a whole. But like I said in the last episode, if the Bible isn't all true, then how can we know that any of the parts in it that aren't directly provable are true? For example, how can we know there's a heaven or that our prayers are heard? Are we praying in vain? Are we having a hope for an afterlife in vain? Another big question here regarding Genesis 1 is, why do some people feel like they have to interpret it in a different way, in an alternative way, rather than just take it as what it literally says? Therefore, both for the mocking in the culture and for the people who wrongly interpret what's in Genesis 1, it's important to prove that Genesis 1 is all true and can be taken literally. So here's what Genesis 1 basically says, as is summed up in Exodus 20. And here's what is controversial, even among Christians, including Christians who are scientists. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So then the key question is, are the days in that passage literally 24-hour days? I mean, did God make this universe, including the earth and humans, in 6 literal 24-hour days? Well, this episode will show that even modern science will say that, yes, he did. And not only modern science, but a quote by an Oxford professor says that all Hebrew scholars and professors in major universities agree. The following is an extract from a letter written in 1984 by Professor James Barr, who was at the time Regius Professor of Hebrew at the University of Oxford. Professor Barr said, "So far as I know, there is no professor of Hebrew or Old Testament at any world-class university who does not believe that the writer of Genesis 1 to 11 intended to convey the idea that creation took place in a series of 6 days, which were the same as the days of 24 hours we now experience. The apologetic arguments which suppose the days of creation to be long eras of time, the figures of years not to be chronological, and the flood to be a merely local Mesopotamian flood, are not taken seriously by any such professors, as far as I know." But that isn't the prevalent conclusion in the Western world today, is it? Well, new modern science discoveries, even within the last few years, not only don't invalidate the 6 literal days of creation, but they validate it. And some of these have been validated by the Nobel Prize in Physics.
Evidence spotted for universe's early growth spurt. Researchers from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, the University of Minnesota, Stanford University, the California Institute of Technology, and NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory say they have spotted evidence that a split second after the Big Bang, the newly formed universe ballooned out at a pace so astonishing that it left behind ripples in the fabric of the cosmos. The new results could rank among the greatest breakthroughs in astrophysics over the last 25 years, such as the Nobel Prize-winning discovery that the universe's expansion is accelerating.
So now let's dive right into that proof, which will cover all of Genesis 1, all of the specifics in it, and the proofs that back them up. Today I'm going to be talking about how a literal reading of Genesis 1 is in harmony with science. Where on the one hand, we should be able to literally read Genesis. And I mean, God's not that complicated. I mean, he was trying to communicate something to us. And then on the other hand, though, we have modern science. And modern science is saying, no, the two don't go together. Well, they do, so that's the good news. My approach here is completely different. Yet, like I said, I labored over this, and I had to make sure every word matched science and each other. Okay, so in China we can criticize Darwin but not the government. In America you can criticize the government but not Darwin. That's a Chinese paleontologist, which is really popular over there. It's funny how different systems have different things. Okay, just as a setup now to understanding the Bible, just a couple of grammar things. Okay, so we have cross-language homonyms. So when we read the Bible, we got to be careful not to read it like English all the time. For instance, English, the word love in Greek is agape, eros, philia, storge. English, man, in the Bible, it means male or human, which is male and female. So it can't be just a male. In English, earth is planet or dirt, which is lowercase earth. Hebrew, earth, is ground, basic matter, or world. English, heaven, is God's domain. Hebrew, firmament, is the sky, outer space, God's domain, expanse, or strata. English, hell, is in the Bible, Hades or Gehenna. Capitalization, that's another thing. Genesis capitalizes when a new thing is being introduced or when a special kind of respect is to be shown. That's different from English. Whereas in English, a proper noun is a unique individual event or place, and that's when it's capitalized, like heaven or earth, the planet Earth. Whereas in the Bible, heaven and earth are only capitalized the first time they are mentioned. Another example is word. A lot of times people will say the Word of God, and they'll capitalize it. No, Jesus is the Word, capitalized only then, and when you're saying the Word of God, it's got to be lowercase. Another linguistic problem is colloquialisms. For example, forever, thousand, thousands. Like if I were to say, I've sung The Lion Sleeps Tonight thousands of times. Well, no, I better say millions. I probably have sung it thousands of times. Millions of times. Now, if somebody in like China or, Russia were to see that, they'd say, wow, you actually sang it millions of times. And they'd try to calculate out, how long that would take. See, but when the Bible says thousand or thousands, it doesn't mean 1,000. See, like, for instance, in Psalm 90, it says that 1,000 years to us, this is a day to you. If you read the whole thing and move on from there, you'll just see that, no, wait a minute, he's not saying 1,000 years to us is a day to you, which is what they're using to say that the days in Genesis are long times. No, he's saying he's an infinity, and therefore 1,000 years is nothing to him. Okay, so now we're going to get into Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So now, heaven and earth, what are those two things? God created space for the physical universe to exist in. And the fact that verse 2 says, darkness was on the face of the deep, shows that the space of the universe was empty. And I'll prove this later by showing that the initial matter traveled unimpeded. And then eretz, which is the word for earth, is defined in Hebrew as that which is firm. This earth is not the planet Earth because earth isn't capitalized until verse 10, and the planet Earth didn't start to be formed until verse 6. The earth here is without form and therefore couldn't be a planet, which has the form of a sphere. So when the Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, you can't think heaven, his domain, earth, this planet. No, you have to take the whole Genesis in context. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, which I just said. Deep is the unfulfilled space of the universe. The pre-existence of the deep heaven, from verse 1, shows that according to the Bible, the space of the universe is not expanding along with matter, as some have theorized. And the fact that darkness was on the face of the deep shows that deep space was empty. So this next verse confirms that it was empty. Job 26:7. He spreads out the northern skies over empty space. So what we have as far as heaven and earth go is the heaven is the space, empty, dark, and earth is matter, basic matter. The earth, the lowercase e earth, it's basic matter. is showing that science, logic, and linguistics support a literal translation of Genesis. But the fact that the literal can even be taken seriously as truth is supported by the many proofs of the Bible from many disciplines in my book, The Proof That God Exists and the Bible is True. So that's the foundation for even being able to say and take seriously that the Bible is true. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Okay, the waters. Ancient Hebrews defined the word as basic matter. That is the way that ancient people, Hebrews, Syrians, Arabians, expressed the origins of matter as primeval waters, and that's the book that's from. Mayim is translated as juice as well as waters, a type of initial energy and not literally H2O. So we can have basic matter, eretz, and we can have this other kind of thing, which is waters, and I'm going to show what that thing is now. There are two distinct types of manifestations within physicality. Eretz, which is basic matter, and electromagnetic waves. That's the waters, and I'll show you why. The Hebrew word for moved upon, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, is March 5th, like March 5th. It's literally translated as vibrated. That's the Hebrew translation, which is how electromagnetic waves could be formed out of pure energy. I mean, it's amazing, the electromagnetic spectrum. Why is it all waves? The visible part and the non-visible part. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. The fact that the initial matter was able to travel so fast was because, like I said, it was dark and empty on the deep. And Newton's first law of motion says an object at rest tends to stay at rest. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. And it tends to stay in motion at the same speed unless a force acts on it. So that's what happened to the initial matter. Well, then shouldn't it still be traveling at that speed? Yeah, it is. Okay, my take on the Big Bang and why some Christians reject it and how I've reconciled it and the distant starlight problem. I think Christians reject it because it sounds like secular science. And no, God just put everything in place at one time, which he did, but he did it as a bang. And the reasons why I think the Big Bang happened is because Hubble discovered that due to the redshift, Doppler effect applied to the light spectrum, galaxies are moving away from us. And the further away they are, the faster they are moving. That's what Hubble discovered. And Einstein says this was his greatest error, because he said that he thought that the universe, everything in it, was static and in place. So he says that was his biggest error. So if galaxies are moving apart, there must have been a time when they were closer together. Continual backwards regression. So if they're moving apart, there had to be a time when they were back here. And that's to a spot on the Big Bang. Plus, there's 17 Bible verses that say that God stretched out the heavens. For example, who covers yourself with light as with a garment? Who stretches out the heavens like a curtain? So that's kind of like a bang. It's not only a bang, though. It's like he's in it. He's got light on like a garment. So he's in the universe himself. So a common criticism of the Bible's accuracy is its account of 7 24-hour days, creation timeline, in addition to a 6,000-year-old Earth, as opposed to starlight that has been measured to be 13.77 billion light years away. So I'm going to show you now how that is reconciled with the Bible. Okay, Newton's first law of motion, unimpeded. I already explained that there was a Big Bang, which is F sub 0, the initial force. Then there's F at points along the way. The first material was out there, and then as material and forces were forming, it started slowing down. So there's not only F sub 0 and F sub t, but there's C sub 0 and C sub t, the speed of light. And plus, the speed of light has been measured to slow down over the last 300 years. And some people say, well, that's because it was inferior measuring devices back then. No, there's a place in Russia that has been measuring since the 1700s with the same method and the same equipment. And light is slowing down. Therefore, the initial stars traveled much faster, and they've been measured to still do so via viewing their redshift. And they got to locations much quicker than the 13.77 billion years estimate based on the current speed of light.
Within the last 24 months, Dr. Hal McGale, a physicist at Imperial College in London, Dr. John Barrow of Cambridge, Dr. Andy Albrecht of the University of California, Davis, and Dr. John Moffat at the University of Toronto have all published work advocating their belief that light speed was much higher, as much as 10 to the 10th power faster, in the early stages of the Big Bang than it is today. It's important to note that none of these researchers have expressed any bias toward a predetermined answer, biblical or otherwise. If anything, they are antagonistic toward a biblical worldview.
Okay, so now I'm going to explain what is redshift. This is an important thing to understand. Okay, so say there's a boat in the water. You see that the waves in the back of the boat are more spread out, whereas the waves in the front of the boat are more compact. So there you see that, and you know the boat is moving. If it wasn't moving, well, the water would be still. This is the Doppler effect in the physical sense. Frequency changes reveal motion. For instance, here's the Doppler effect on sound. So if it goes ding, 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 a fire engine. Well, the frequency changed, and the human body manifests that as pitch. So that's how we know that there's actual change in the frequency. Why doesn't the frequency stay the same as it emanates, just getting to us longer? No, it stretches, and pitch is the proof of that. Well, in the light spectrum, it's the same way. It's like those waves spread out. The frequency is less on the red end of the spectrum, and it's moving away from us, and it's blue on this end of the spectrum, and it's moving towards us. Okay, so here's how starlight is analyzed. They look at stars, they see their light, they run it through a spectrograph, and just like a prism, it breaks out as on the top there. That's light, that's pure light. Okay, now you see how in the next two, there's an absorption spectral lines and there's emission spectral lines. So in the absorption one, if you're viewing light, like say from my shirt, it's like light is going off of my shirt, but you're only seeing brown and white. Why? Because the shirt is absorbing light and only letting out brown, or the colors that cause brown. See? So that's the emission spectral lines. And each element has its own signature, by the way. It's shown here. So the spectrum on the left is light from the sun. Well, you see the signature on the right? It's the same, but notice how it's shifted into the red. That's why they call it redshift. So what is that telling us? That's telling us that it's moving away from us very fast. Now look at all these. You see there's red ones there? Some are even redder than others. Well, why is that? The light coming from it really isn't red. What it's saying is that the galaxies and the stars are moving away from us. So now the question is, how fast are they moving away? The redshift calculations by secular astronomers have won them the Nobel Prize in 2011 and the Shaw Prize for Astronomy in 2006. There is an accelerating expansion of the universe. See, and it is accepted modern astrophysics that the outer galaxies are traveling faster than the speed of light. And when the redshift z of a galaxy is 1.4, the galaxy is traveling at the speed of light. Well, there have been redshift measurements of up to 11.9. Therefore, modern astronomy acknowledges that outer galaxies are traveling much faster than the speed of light. So how does that tie in with this whole picture? Well, what it says is, it gives my picture that I'm saying that the initial stuff from the Big Bang got out there very quickly. And then it slowed down. So it's not only did it get out there very quickly, it's still going that fast. And that's what they've measured. So I've done my little calculation, including Bible science, Bible data. And basically what I came up with, using 6,000 years as t, the time of the universe, it comes out to 2.417 million c is equal to the initial speed of light. Now that could be even greater because we can't see all the way out. And God called the light day and the darkness he called night. So now we have the thing I talked about earlier, the capitalization. So day and night are just what it says in the verse, light and darkness. It's not morning and evening, and we're going to get into that. And there was evening and there was morning. Some reject literal interpretation because they're equating morning with sunrise and evening with sunset. Morning, by Jews back then, and by a lot of people now, is looked at as a time to start work. And evening is a time to stop work. So that's what God was doing. First of all, evening and morning are mentioned over 100 times in the Old Testament, and every time it means a 24-hour period. If long periods were intended, why even mention evening and morning? There's no reason to. It would just confuse people. And confusion was not God's intention. For the naysayers who often resort to mocking, scoffing, and name-calling, which I've experienced a lot, as their response to Bible literists, I say to them, are mocking and scoffing scientific? Do you expect others to believe or be intimidated by you just because you mock and scoff? Now, let's hear your science. And that's the way we have to go at them. Because most people are just parroting what they've heard in the culture. This is an acronym that I made up called Truth Phobia. And I say that you haven't really landed on truth if you're using feelings, opinions, beliefs, intellectualizing, or authorities. So we need to be real connoisseurs of truth. There's this whole idea of the firmament. The firmament in Hebrew, it's an expanse or a strata.
And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And there was evening, and there was morning, a second day. The fact that heaven is capitalized here means that this is an introduction of something new and different from the verse 1 heaven. And God is giving this firmament a specific name, heaven. And the Bible refers to three heavens: outer space, mentioned in verse 1, the sky, introduced here, and God's dwelling place, a spiritual dimension called the third heaven in 2 Corinthians 12:2. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. This verse shows that there was enough water on earth, which was entirely covered with water before God let dry land emerge, to create a global flood. The extra water was sent to the fountains of the great deep, which is Genesis 7, which was a major water source for the flood. Also, the downpour had to be pretty heavy to wipe out all flying things. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. This confirms that the lower waters were the waters on earth, the planet. And earth, the ground, not the planet, was capitalized here for the first time, meaning something new and different from the earth in verse 1. The fact that the seas is capitalized shows that this is a new thing, where water and land are separated. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after its kind, whose seed is in itself, upon the earth," and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after its kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after its kind. And God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, a third day. So here's yet another reason for the days being 24 hours. That is, would all this vegetation last long without the sun, which doesn't appear until the next day? And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night. Here it is saying that the way that a day, and years, and seasons, and night and day are measured is by the action of the sun and the moon. What I'm doing here is I'm showing how all of Genesis 1 makes sense, both with science and reality. He made the stars also, and God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, a fourth day. Now in Hebrew this reads, "And the small luminary to rule the night, along with the stars, which he had made previously." That's for verse 17. By the way, having proven that God created the universe, it surely can be assumed that he could put the universe and all that is in it in place in any way that he wanted.
6 days?
Yep,
6 truly, really days?
yep,
You're sure it says 6 days?
yes.
I wonder why he took so long.
So now I hope you enjoyed this episode and that it helped clarify some things that you may be hearing in the world or that you may have questions about. I know there's a lot of complex science involved in it, so just go over it over and over, and then eventually you'll get it. And that's an important thing to do because our life and our eternity might depend on it. And that's something you don't want to take chances with. So I hope to see you all in the next episode.